okay, is it a raw chicken breast with telepathic powers and a buzzsaw arm? Is that what I should be thinking of it as? I'm not a skimmer when I read, but I was skimming. I skimmed this book. Hello, my name is Madeline, or just Maddie, and I am many things. I'm a picker, I'm a grinner, I'm a lover, and I'm a sinner. But my dear children and adults, I try not to be a quitter. Yet it does happen. DNFing is a term that means to abandon a book without finishing it. DNF did not finish. I try to avoid DNFing as much as possible, but sometimes you just have to admit that you're not having a good time. It's time to close the book, and that's okay. When I DNF a book, I almost always call it quits pretty early on, and it's usually a like, it's not you, it's me situation. Like, there's something that I pick on that I just can't let go of, and then I can't lose myself in the story, so I just decide that it's time to give the book a red card and eject it from my life. But just because I have DNF'd a book doesn't mean I don't think anyone else would ever enjoy it. If you look at any of the books that I am going to talk about today and check out their reviews, I guarantee there will be like dozens of 5-star reviews for every single one, and that's great. Just in the time or place or format that I picked them up, it wasn't what I needed at the time. I sound like your friend who's trying to explain how they're still on good terms with their exes. Anyway, also, if you watching this want to advocate for any of these books and recommend that I give it another shot, totally open to that for all of them, except maybe the last one. So yeah, let's keep things relatively positive. I do feel kind of bad though, and so instead of individually apologizing over and over again to all of these authors and all of these books as we go, I want to start with just sort of a blanket, I'm sorry to every book and author that I'm going to talk about. I'm so sorry. It's not you, it's me. This is a me problem. I had a ponytail on my wrist and now it looks like I was restrained. Ugh. I'm especially sorry for this first one, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. I'm not talking about The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I have not read that book. That's a different book. I just got the titles mixed up in my head all the time. This is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, Paolini. If that author's name sounds familiar to you, you may have heard of his dragon books. I sure as hell have. These are looking rough. I am an inheritance cycle girl. I am aware the books have flaws. I simply do not care about those flaws. This is the first fantasy series I read as a young person that felt like it wasn't just for kids. You had to look up in the back to see how to pronounce things and translations for the made-up languages that were in the books. There were maps that you could reference to like see where things were and how the journey was going. And I was enamored. Appendices? Are you kidding? And Paolini, the gigantic nerd, started writing them when he was like 15. Inconceivable. Well, the man is back and he wrote a sci-fi book, which is different. And he's also like a fully grown, established adult, which is also different. I got To Sleep in a Sea of Stars on... That wording is weird. That makes it sound like I was allowed the opportunity to sleep in a sea of stars. I tried out To Sleep in a Sea of Stars on audiobook because I had leftover Audible credits. Also figured it was convenient because I was like hyper fixated on cleaning at the time, so audiobook felt like a nice thing to have in my ear while I was, you know, scrubbing the grout in the bathroom or whatever. This book takes place in space, which you probably could have guessed. Our main character is Kira, and she's stationed on this planet that is not Earth, and is doing some sort of routine surveying work as part of her job. And as she's doing that, she comes across this sort of ancient alien-like relic. And when she interacts with that, she awakens an ancient alien nanotechnology. Well, I guess I don't know if it's necessarily ancient or not, but a nanotechnology of some kind, which then binds itself to her body. And awakening that technology has some repercussions with some different alien races and different entities that are in space. And also she would like to get it off of her body because it's like a parasite slash symbiote slash like skin suit type thing. So it's really on her. It's very much on her. And she would like to get it off. So that kind of sets her off on her whole quest. First off, yes, this is a female protagonist written by a male author. That in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Thinking of a lot of my favorite books, several of them have female protagonists written by male authors. I think it just maybe caught my attention more starting this book out because so much of the story revolves around Kira's body, because that's where like the suit symbiote parasite is. So that inherently makes more of the story sort of about her body and her feelings about her body. So my reaction was kind of like, okay, let's be careful here how we're doing this. But I don't remember anything being too noticeably like cringe-inducing about that. I gave this book a yellow card pretty early on because someone used babe as an endearment, and I really hope that if we're at the point where we are exploring distant alien planets, we are not still calling each other babe. Let's leave that shit on Earth, please. But anyway, I managed to let it go enough to continue. Honestly, I got pretty far into this book before I called it quits. 40-50%, maybe a little more than that even. And I was tolerating kind of a slow build. I understand that with sci-fi and fantasy stuff, especially in the first installment of a series, which I believe this is, there's a lot of world building to be done. There's a lot of setting and characters and sort of systems that need to be established to like keep the story going. And so I was trying to be tolerant of that as we went. But eventually listening to this book felt like more of a chore, even more than the chores I was actively doing. And it was partially the slow pacing, but more of it by far was that I could not get a clear picture in my head of anything that was going on. Part of that might be my own lack of experience with sci-fi, because I don't have a lot of experience with sci-fi. But yeah, I just couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be imagining for the settings or the different things that were happening. I appreciate that the aliens aren't just like humans with green skin and big heads or something, but the way that they are in all of their sort of differentness, I was sitting there like, okay, is it a raw chicken breast with telepathic powers and a buzzsaw arm? Is that what I should be thinking of it as? And that got to be kind of exhausting. And I want to picture things right. I don't just want to like fill in all that many gaps when I don't have the basics of stuff. Like I can tolerate if I don't know what a specific character's hair color is or something, but when it's whole settings or whole like groups of characters, alien characters, that just made it really hard for me to kind of immerse myself in the story. I also don't know if part of it's just Paolini's writing style, because I do remember in the Inheritance Cycle having a couple of things that I sort of struggled to picture correctly based on his descriptions. Like Farthendur, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, someone can correct me if they want. Farthendur was like a mountain city inside of a larger mountain. So like mountain, hollowed out mountain, city in the mountain. And my small brain, what is that supposed to look like? Don't really know. And then even really early on when Eragon finds the dragon egg, spoiler alert, there's a dragon egg in the dragon books. He didn't realize it was a dragon egg. He thought it was a stone. And so Paolini couldn't describe it as egg-shaped, because then later when it hatched and Eragon was like, what? It's an egg. We'd be like, yeah, he said it was egg-shaped. Why didn't you figure that out? So the way that Paolini did describe it, it made me think it was like a Tylenol shit, like a pill capsule shape, but like sort of flattened and made of blue marble. And I was like, how does a dragon fit in something like that? So I don't know if part of that is just like his writing style doesn't vibe with my imagination. So yes, that was the main thing with To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. I just could not get a picture in my head of what was going on. I know I already apologized, but I want to reiterate, I don't think this is a bad book. It's entirely possible that the audiobook format just was kind of hindering me too. I'm not opposed at all to giving it another shot at some point. I also read really briefly that somebody bought the TV rights, which would be great because then I don't have to picture things in my head because there will already be a picture on my TV. And hopefully it will be better than Eragon the movie, which I have still never seen out of pure spite. Next, we've got Gild by Raven Kennedy. This is another book title I get confused with other book titles. Gild is a King Midas inspired story, and it is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series. I am not talking about Gilded by Marissa Meyer, which is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. I have not read that book. Should I read that book? My fridge is making a sound that I am unfamiliar with and sort of disturbed by. We're just gonna roll with it. This is going to be quick. I do not typically participate in Kindle Unlimited, but I got it to read Verity by Colleen Hoover, which I mentioned in my last video, I believe. So I already paid for a month and I figured I might as well read some other stuff. And now it's louder. Gild was on a top list or a recommended or something, and I decided that I was going to be so very brave and just give it a shot. It sounded vaguely familiar. I figured it would be okay. Whereas with To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, I quit because I couldn't really get a picture of what was going on in my head. With Gild, I quit because I didn't like the picture of what was going on that was forming inside my head. Thank you, Fridge. I started it. I got not at all far into it and gave it a yellow card and some quick paragraph skimming for the old man intercourse party that was going on. So we were off to a weird start. But then it mentioned prehensile ribbons coming off the main character's back. And I decided that was not something I felt like being part of. Were they like fleshy? Were they like tapewormy, tentacly kind of things? Could she control them? Or were they just sort of like doing their own thing? I don't know. I don't know what that specific like phobia is, but I think I've got it. No thanks. Next, we're going to talk about The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nghi, but I'd like to bring you along on a journey. The year was 2021, and I was in the last couple hours of a very, very long solo drive through one of the flattest and most sparsely populated areas in the continental United States. It was full dark, late at night, and I was desperately trying not to fall asleep. Music wasn't helping, blasting the air conditioning wasn't helping, none of my loved ones were answering my phone calls, and I wasn't in an area where I felt like it was smart or safe to pull over and take a nap or like jog around or something. I'd finished most of a Red Bull and was planning to pour the rest directly into my eyes if it did not kick in soon, so sure, The Chosen and the Beautiful audiobook, help me Nghi, you are my only hope. This book is a Great Gatsby retelling focused on Jordan, who is a queer immigrant adoptee with Asian heritage in this version. That's all great. No issues whatsoever with that. But then there's also magical realism included in this retelling, and I think that's where I started to get confused in addition to already being sleepy. At first I kind of thought it was just a writing style choice, like if you read anything by Jandy Nelson, it's kind of like description by way of hyperbole, like just super exaggerated. But then it turned out it was actual magic. I got 2-ish chapters in probably and just really wasn't feeling it. To me, it almost felt like, you know, in science or experiments or things like that, you don't want to mess with a bunch of variables at once. The Great Gatsby retold from Jordan's perspective has potential to be interesting. The Great Gatsby retold from Jordan's perspective with the added context of being queer, being an immigrant, having Asian heritage, especially at that point in time, even more potential to be super interesting. To me, adding in the magical realism stuff felt like it was more distracting from the story rather than adding to it. And I was kind of like, at this point, why not just write a whole new story that's sort of vaguely inspired by The Great Gatsby, but not a direct retelling with like magic and also the change in perspective and all of that together. Again, this is all my perspective based on the limited amount of the book that I listened to. My assumptions and kind of my gut reaction might be totally off. So please let me know if you're a huge fan and think I should try again. Yeah, I just didn't have the patience at that time to keep rolling when I was trying so very, very hard to stay lucid. In conclusion, do everything you can to not drive tired. And if you really can't figure anything else out, turn on a podcast about the Jonestown Massacre and then you will arrive at your destination safely. That's what I did. Next up, we've got 0K by Don DeLillo. The eternal question, is this book pretentious or am I just a big lazy dum-dum? Probably the latter. I really enjoyed Don DeLillo's White Noise. I actually still have it. I first read it for a university course about like technology and industrialization and media and literature. Super interesting class. I also just love like the cover of this book and the back, which is embossed. I don't know if you can see that, but it says, "It's the rainbow hologram that gives this credit card a marketing intrigue." I don't know, I just love it. White Noise is also where my favorite band, the Airborne Toxic Men, got their name, so that holds a special place in my heart too. I also have 0K and I don't remember where I got it. It might have been from a friend who loves those little free libraries that people have outside their houses. I honestly don't remember and I'm probably going to donate it because I didn't finish this book. The book follows the main character Jeffrey, whose stepmother is dying, and his billionaire dad is trying to preserve her life and his own through cryosleep, so they can be like essentially frozen and then reanimated when medicine has advanced really far in the future, so they can like wake up and live a really long time and have all their medical issues taken care of, basically. So the dad like brings Jeffrey to the facility where they're getting ready to kind of supposedly make all that happen. The vibe of this book reminded me a lot of the TV show Legion. I haven't watched Severance, but I think that's also sort of a similar, like, aesthetic. Liminal spaces. Just the vibe is ominous conference room, essentially. Like, generic but unsettling. In Zero K, the facility and the interactions between people and everything were so strange and unnatural, but in a purposeful sort of way. In a way that made me feel like I was missing something as I was reading descriptions of weird statues or like sort of vague foreboding dialogue. The whole time I was reading it, it just felt like it was all going way over my head. I'm also not at all a futurologist, like the people who get really excited about the advancements and kind of the potential of tech in the future. I'm especially weirded out by stuff like cryogenic sleep or putting your whole consciousness on a USB drive for future generations, or picking out your children based on embryo's genetic likelihood to be an Olympic gold medalist. Like, things like that just make me feel weird. Ethical conundrums abound. And overall, I just feel like the unknown makes life worth living. Death makes life worth living. It's entirely possible that that is the point of this book and I just didn't get far enough into it. It kind of seems like that's where it was heading, but I'm not entirely sure because I DNF'd this one. This is one where it was maybe, again, good book, wrong time. If I remember it, I picked it up because I've been reading a bunch of just kind of fluffy nonsense books, and I was like, hey you need to engage your brain more with your reading. So I picked up something more cerebral with Zero K, and then I failed to reach the cerebrality of the work. Last up, we've got From Lukov with Love. Mariana Zapata has been called the Queen of Slow Burns, and I was aware of that before reading this book. So some of this might be on me. I don't know how to talk about this and make it make sense, but I had read another of her books, The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, a few months before I picked this one up. And for The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, I was just going with it. I was just reading the book to read instead of thinking thoughts. No critical eye, no analysis happening. It was just kind of like, well, it's better than thinking. So yeah, I definitely noticed it was slow moving. I just didn't really care at the time. I was clearly in a different mindset with Lukov. From Lukov with Love is a romance about Jasmine, a figure skater who ends up having to partner with a guy that she really, really hates for pair skating because she's getting really old in her mid-20s and is running out of time to kind of make her figure skating dreams come true. You know, when your dreams are over when you're 25. I generally love a slow burn. Give me some pining, give me some yearning, some will they, won't they, I don't know, let's see. But I got about a half hour into From Lukov with Love, and slow did not begin to cover it. Even compared to the meandering of The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, which again, I had experience, I should have known better. But oh my gosh, baby steps. The kind of baby that falls over frequently while trying to step. I'm not a skimmer when I read, but I was skimming. I skimmed this book. You can have a slow burn without having a story that drags. In this particular case, there are two kind of writing habits that weigh this story down until it is barely crawling along. The first is extraneous detail, and the second is indulgent inner monologues. So the first two chapters of the book both take place exclusively in the skating rink on 2 consecutive days, I'm 90% sure. And that whole time, it's mostly just Jasmine monologuing to herself, and it really kind of doesn't go a whole lot of places, and it's not the best opening. Most of it is just her laying the groundwork of all of her history sort of in her head. She mentions twice how she always puts her like skate guards in the same spot when she's on the ice, and even if that detail becomes relevant at some point in the future, we definitely don't need it 2 separate times. Then in the locker room, Jasmine doesn't just say, I got dressed. She says, and this is a direct quote, I slipped into my underwear, jeans, collared shirt, socks, and the best looking comfortable shoes I could afford. Yes, that last detail lets us know that she doesn't have a ton of money, but we get that detail at the exact same time as we get to read verbatim an entire long text exchange that she's having with her mom where they're talking about money, and then also her own like inner monologue commentary to herself where she's thinking about how she doesn't have a lot of money. And so then, by the time 4 pages later, she's fully dressed and ready to leave the locker room, I'm like, I get it, I get it. This is me screaming at my Kindle. You're not in a great place financially, and you put on socks and underwear when you got dressed. Thank you, can we move on now? Whereas Zero K assumed that I'm way smarter than I am, From Lukov with Love assumes that I can't pick up on a single nuance unless it is hammered into the stir-fry meat of my brain from every direction at once. It's not show, don't tell. It's show and show and show and show and show and show and tell and tell and tell. No chance at all that you'll miss something because she's gonna reiterate it 7,000 times. So I was losing patience with that, but on top of just kind of being irritated with the pace, I did not like the main character. And I hate saying that. I'm not complaining because her perspective was kind of bitter and bitchy. Women are allowed to be bitter and bitchy if they want. Not every protagonist, not every first person character has to be all sweet and badass and perfect all the time. No thanks. Especially if you're being told that your dreams are going to be over and you'll have no more chance now that you're 25 or whatever she is. I'm complaining because her perspective was so effing immature. Jasmine's allowed to be a bitch, but I will not stand for immaturity. I saved one line because I, first of all, could barely believe it was in the book, and also because I hated it so much it was kind of an obsession. Please keep in mind that this character is in her mid-20s. Quote, "The other one looked like she was about to crap her leotard and tights. Good, I hoped she did, and I hoped it had a diarrhea-like texture so it would go everywhere." Mid-20s. You can be kind of mean and kind of bitchy without sounding like an actual child. I would honestly rather read, "She looks like she's about to crap her tights. I hope her parents get divorced." That's better writing and still plenty bitchy, but not with the toilet humor immaturity of like a 12-year-old boy. I don't know, I just really didn't like reading that. And while that diarrhea-like texture phrase is surely a standout, there's just reoccurrent like lazy bitchiness throughout the whole inner monologue that Jasmine has. She says some stuff, especially about the guy, I think his name's Ivan, that she was gonna get paired up with, where she was essentially like, "I wanted to fart on his face because he's such a dumb butthead, asshole, Satan, butt face." And I was like, who are you? Be more creative with your vitriol, at least. Last thing, and this is maybe where I deserve to go to nitpicky jail, but we're gonna have a little writing lesson here. When you say, "I work out," and work out is your action phrase, your verb, whatever, that's 2 words. I work out, 2 words. When you're talking about like, "I need a workout," or "I finished a workout," and workout is an object or a concept or noun, to use the technical term, then it's 1 word. This book did that wrong. And again, super nitpicky, but that's the one example I can remember off the top of my head, but there were a few where things like weren't quite where they should have been. That's not a huge deal, but little things like that do bother me, especially considering like some of the writing choices that were involved and just the general length of this book. Also, I think it's like 500 pages. All those things together make me think that it needed another pass with an editor, or like a first pass with an editor. I don't see myself ever finishing this one. Thank you for finishing this video about books that I did not finish. I would love to see you subscribe. I would love to see comments, like the video if you want. I would especially love comments with some underrated books that you think I should try out. I want to be more adventurous. Just because I'm trying to avoid DNFing books doesn't mean that I shouldn't try new stuff as often. So yeah, anything like that. I also want to plug my book Instagram, or just Maddie on Instagram. I've been doing some weird carousel stuff that you might find interesting. But anyway, yeah. See you later.